do subscribe to my channel.
Hello everybody, today I wanted to honor a request that I show you how to create your very first Python program. So maybe you've never coded before, and instead of watching all these tutorials on how to do certain features or projects, you just want to get started. And so today I'm going to show you just what to do. So maybe you don't have a IDE or a way to run Python code. So I'm going to show you this cool little website called Repl.it. So here's the link right here, and I'll include this in the description of the video, but just come here and come over here to sign up. Once you come to sign up, you can either do a username, email, password, or you can sign up using Google, Facebook, or GitHub. Once you do that, it should automatically log you in. So I already have an account, so I'm just gonna log in, and I use GitHub to log myself in. And once you're logged in, it should show you a page like this. It may bring up some questions such as what skill level are you? What languages are you most interested in? Are you a student or a teacher? It doesn't really matter too much what you say. You can just follow as closely as it applies to you. And once you come to this home screen, you can see that there are no projects down here. This is just your recent. I've coded before on here, so of course I have projects. You will not see projects down there. Over here is something called My Repls. So Repl.it is really cool. You don't have to save your projects. It automatically saves for you every time you type. Once it saves and you come out of your browser and come back in, you can come over to My Repls, and it will have all your projects stored in there. It will tell you how long ago you created that project. It will tell you the size of it. You can even name your projects. So today I'm going to show you how to create your very first project, of course. So there are lots of ways to first start a project. You can come over here to New REPL, up here to this plus sign, or you can just start a language. Whatever you push, just make sure that you're doing Python language. If you click on like JavaScript and try to write Python code in there, it's not going to recognize it and it's just going to throw errors. Today I'm going to be talking about data types. I'm just going to call this my first data types. You can call this whatever you want, but I like to organize my projects, so I like to do something that makes sense. Once you've figured out a name, you can go ahead and press Create REPL. Now, once I do, it's going to pop up a new project here. This project will have three main windows. On the left side, this is your files. We're not going to worry about this right now. That will come much later when I'm trying to create multiple files of Python or even other languages for the same project. But by default, it will have this main.py file, and that's what we're coding in. Over here in the center, that is where we're going to be coding, and you can see there's the main.py there. Now, .py means Python. If I were to rename this to .js, you can see it automatically populates the JavaScript icon, which is a different coding language. Or there's HTML, CSS, C. Of course, we're going to be using .py for Python, so make sure it says that. This is where we code. That's not real code, so don't type that. And then if I wanted to have some kind of output, it would show up over here in what's called the console window. If I were to code some kind of calculation like 2 plus 2 over here, and I wanted the user to see the answer of 2 plus 2, it would show up over here as 4. What the user sees will be over here, okay? So let's go ahead and start writing our first Python code. Now, I do like to have a dark theme on this. Most coders do. You can come over here to this gear called settings, and you can change the theme to dark if you'd like. So that's much easier on the eyes, especially if you're going to be coding for 8 hours a day for your job or just for fun. This can really cause some headaches, so I like to use dark mode. Also, if you're in a climate where there's lots of bugs around, this will keep the bugs off of your screen, and nobody likes bugs in their program, right? So let's go ahead and write our first program. The first thing I'm going to show you is called a print statement. This is a function. So a function has the name of the function, in our case it's print, and after that typically it has parentheses after it. Sometimes there's data that goes inside the parentheses and sometimes not. Now if I just do print right now, it's not going to do anything. It is going to have just this white space because I have nothing in there. But if I put something in, I'm going to put in a string. I'll explain more of what a string is later. But a string typically is just text, and text needs to have quotation marks. So inside quotation marks, I'm going to say my first program. Okay. And now if I hit this run button, it's going to say my first program. Okay. So the user is not seeing all the code. They're just seeing what I want them to see. There is a little shortcut. If you're on Mac, you can say Command Enter, and that will run your program. If you're on PC or Windows, you can do Control Enter and it will run it instead of clicking that play button. If you like those little shortcuts, I like them. Okay, so I am going to be talking about data types, and before I do, I want to show you that you can make little notes inside of your code that your compiler will actually ignore. In Python, it's the hashtag. In other languages, they use their own what's called syntax to write those, but in Python, it's just hashtag. And whatever I say doesn't matter if it's in there. If I hit run, it prints out the same exact thing because that's what I wrote. And my compiler knows that this is commented because of the hashtag. Whatever I write in here will be ignored. It's just for my viewing. So if I take this hashtag away, however, now it thinks I'm trying to write code, but it says error, that code doesn't make sense. So syntax error means that you wrote code that doesn't make sense to the computer. Usually, the very bottom of the error code will tell you what's wrong. So in my case, I have invalid syntax. And then towards the top, it will usually tell you what line it is. So it says on line 1 is where it doesn't like the code. Sometimes the code or the error isn't actually on the line it tells you. Sometimes it's the line before. So just keep that in mind. So I'm going to make a comment there, and I'm going to call this data types just to keep my code organized. It'll be nice for you visually. So the first data type I'm going to be talking about is something called a string. So this is a string, and I'm going to store this string inside of a variable. You guys already saw the string that I wrote, which was my first program, right? But if I just print that, that's just printing it. It's not actually storing it into any data or anything like that. So I'm going to create a variable. I can call this whatever I like. Now, if you think about math, we usually have variables there, such as x equals 2, right? X equals 2 just means that x is 2. In computer programming, that's pretty much the same thing. Whatever is on the right side of this equal sign is going to be stored inside of this variable called x. In fact, I can just print x like this, and you can see it prints 2. Pretty cool, right? Now, I don't want to call this x. I never want to see x, y, or z. If you did that in a company, typically they'll probably slap your hand away, telling you not to do that. So you can call it whatever you want. I'm going to call my string name, and I'm just going to put a name in there. I'm just going to say the name of Bob. So this string is being stored inside of name. Remember, a string, like I talked about before, it's just text. And when you just want text, you need to put quotation marks around it. So let's print name, and it prints out Bob over here. So if you need to hit pause and make sure that works fine, then go ahead and do that. Now if we come back, now I get a lot of questions from my students that say, well, why don't you put quotation marks around that? Well, if I do, watch what happens. It changes from Bob to name. So when I put quotation marks around it, I'm just telling it to print just the text of name. I don't want the text of name, I want what's stored inside the variable name. So take those quotations away, and now it's an actual variable that has something stored inside of it, which is Bob in this case. Okay, so that is a string. This next one is called an integer. So in mathematical terms, if you think about what an integer is, it's just a whole number. It doesn't have any decimals or anything. I'm going to use a realistic variable name called age. So age is a great way to represent a integer, right? So I can say 12. Notice I don't have quotation marks around it. And when I print age, it should print 12. Now, a lot of people also ask me that same thing. Why don't I put quotation marks around this? Well, you can. If I do, watch what happens over here. It looks exactly the same as it was without the quotation marks there. Well, why is that? Well, this is just the text of 12. The text of 12 and the integer of 12 look exactly the same, but int 12 means it has an actual value. The value of it is 12. The value of a string of 12 is just text. So if I try to do math, let's say my age plus 2 like this, well, what's 12 plus 2? 12 plus 2 is 14, right? Let's watch what happens when I click run. It says 122. The reason is it's because it saw this text and this text and it put them together. We said add this text and show me what it does. That's why it says 1, 2, 2. That's why you don't want to do that. Now if I take these quotation marks away, let's see what happens. Now it says 14. So putting these in quotation marks takes away its numerical value. Most of the time I would not put any kind of quotation marks around that. So just use that so that you can use it for math later on. One of the only times I ever put a number inside of quotation marks is if I'm trying to store somebody's phone number, because I don't need to use math on someone's phone number for any reason ever. So typically I'll store that as a string. So the next one I'm going to be talking about is floats. So float is just the opposite of integer. It's anything with a decimal. I'll just call this number. And it can be like 5.76. That is a float. Even if there's a number like 4.0, technically, yes, that's a whole number. But if it has a decimal point in there, and if you're ever wondering what data type you are working with and you forgot what it's called or anything like that, you can always print the type. Inside of this type function, I can put in my name and you can see it says string. I can put age in there and it will tell me it's an integer. I can put in number and it will tell me it's float. I can even do 40.0 and it will tell me it's a float. Why? Because there is a decimal in there. If I took that decimal away, it will say integer. So that's a really nice tool if you don't know what you're working with. Make sure that works. Also notice I'm not putting quotation marks around that. That's just if I want to use text. The next one I'm going to be talking about is something called bool or boolean. So a boolean is a true or false statement. For example, if I'm trying to write a video game in Python, then I might say something like run game equals true. But boolean is a true or false statement. So I kind of think of this as an on or off switch. So let's say I'm writing a game and I want it to run. I'm going to say run game equals true. That means my game will go on forever and ever until the user clicks a button that says end game. If I want to end that game, when the user clicks on end game, I'm going to let run game know that it's now false. And now it will stop the game. So that's a good example. We won't use those a whole ton at first, but later on we will. So that is a boolean. The next one I'm going to talk about is what's called a list. If you come from different coding languages, such as JavaScript or C, you might remember the data type called array. That's spelled like this. An array is actually a list in Python. It's the same exact thing as arrays. So for example, if I have a list, I'll just call it heroes. A list will have square brackets. If you don't know where the square brackets are, they are located next to the letter P on your keyboard. Inside of there, I'm going to put in whatever items I want, as long as it's separated by a comma. So for example, since I'm doing a list of heroes, I'm going to do Spider-Man. Outside of that string, I'm going to do comma. Next, I'll do Hulk. Outside of that string, comma. And then I'll just do one more, Ant-Man. So that is a list. Now, if I print that heroes list, it's actually going to look just as ugly in the console as it does over here. So there are a few different ways where we can make this look prettier by using code, but we're not going to do that now. That's just what it looks like. Now, you're not limited to just using strings here. You can use whatever data types you want. So I can even put in age here. Now you can see that if I put age in here, which is my variable of 12, if I hit run, now you can see instead of age, it says 12. I can put in other elements such as number. I can put in a number of like 45 or something. It doesn't matter. I can even put in another list. So if I had like maybe a list called powers, and I listed some powers like spidey senses or webs, I can put that list right into here. So it's called powers. And if I hit run, you can see I have a list within a list. So you can put anything inside of a list. Now, I don't want to talk about any more data types. There is one more that I'll get to later called a dictionary. It's the same thing as an object if you come from different languages, but we're not going to get into that quite yet. Okay, so these are your first data types. Now, what if I wanted to create a program where I can use some of this data and have it print over here that might look nice? So let's say I wanted to print some kind of sentence like, hi, my name is Bob. Okay, which is fine. But what if the user's name isn't Bob? What if it's actually Susan? If I hit run, well, guess what? My program's not printing Susan, it's printing Bob. So I want it to say name here. But if I do name, remember, it's just going to say my name is name, right? And if I run that, it just says my name is name. And that's because name is just text right now because it's inside of a string. But what if I were to tell you that there's a way to write Python code inside of your string? This is going to be what's called string interpolation. String interpolation allows you to put code inside of your string to have a very nice output. There's a few different ways to do string interpolation. This is one of them. You can just say my name is, and outside the string you can do plus name like this. And now it says my name is Susan. But if I have a long string and I have a lot of data, this is actually going to look super messy. So there's a new modern way of doing this, and that is doing it like this. We're going to surround everything that's a variable in squiggly braces. The squiggly brace is the same button as your square bracket on your keyboard, but you have to hit shift. You need to have the opening and then the closing. And then after that, we need to put the letter F in front of this first quotation mark. F stands for format. Format will scan your text like this, and it's looking for the squiggly braces. Once it finds squiggly braces, it goes, okay, everything in here is Python code. And then once it finds the ending squiggly brace, it goes, okay, so that's the end of the code. The rest should be text. Hi, my name is name, and I am age. So let's see what happens. Now it says, hi, my name is Susan, and I am age 12, which is awesome. Let me get rid of this files section so I can have more room. And so it's cool because if I change this to maybe the 13 now, it's going to change my entire program because I'm using string interpolation. I'm referring to the data. Instead of just hard coding 13 in here like this, and let's say that they turn 14 the following year, and I hit run, it's still going to say 14. So that's why I want to use string interpolation, so that this is called what's called dynamic. So only the values have to change, and then the rest of my program will adapt to it. I can say my favorite color is, let's create one called fave color. Okay, so I'll make one right here. Fave color equals, now this is going to be a color, so it's just going to be text, so I'll put it in a string. I'll just say blue. And now it says blue. So if you play like The Legend of Zelda or something like that, they'll usually ask you for your name at the beginning of the game, and then they'll just stick your name inside of there so that your name is actually in the story. So they're just using string interpolation, very easy. Notice that instead of spaces, when I'm doing my variable naming, you can't have spaces. You can't have two words or multiple words. It needs to be all one word. So we need to use an underscore in Python and everything lowercase. So make sure you do that if you want multiple words. I can even say fave color of dog, that's how we would do it. In other coding languages, such as JavaScript, we would separate the words like this: fave color of dog. This is called camel casing. This would actually still run just fine, but it's not part of the Zen of Python. The community of Python has a very set standard of how you should write code, and everyone's going to write it that way. So use underscores and all lowercase. So congrats, that is your first program in Python. We did learn a lot. So we set up your REPL. We learned about some data types, and you'll use these every time you code. And we even set up a very simple program that uses text and Python code inside of your text. So if you do like these videos, please like and subscribe and hit the notification button so that when I come out with a new video, you are notified about it. And I'd like to take requests from you guys. If there's something you're very interested in but you can't find online, please let me know and I'll see if I can make a video for you for my next tutorial. Thank you so much and happy coding.